as I've said on the podcast over the last few weeks, I believe this is going to change everything about procurement. A year ago, we were talking about agentic AI and all these other things. And I was kind of like, oh, I don't even know what it means. It feels like just another flavor of the same ice cream that we were eating, 24 months ago. But right now, this is completely different, and it will change the way that your stakeholders interact with you.
I'm not technical. Let's make this clear here. I'm getting more technical as we go. The most coding I do is obviously vibe coding. I really don't know what I'm doing. My first introduction to operating a terminal was through vibe coding, Claude code, and everything else. So it's been a learning process for me.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Proc-N-Roll, your guide to practical procurement. I'm super excited about this very special jam session today. I've got two of my friends who are incredibly smart when it comes to AI. If you've been watching the news over the last, 4 to 6 weeks, this OpenClaw, Claude chat, like it's had 5 names over the, since the year started. There's been a lot of news. There's a lot of automation. There's a lot of fear and concern. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt, whatever all these things are, right? But wow, in my mind has just been blown with what's possible now. Kasey has been working in our graphite labs here to understand better how this agent actually works, how this technology works, and how we can implement it safely in our own company. Zach, I know you've been like sleeves all the way up to your elbows figuring out AI for your company and your customers. This combination of Zach and Kasey today is one you will not want to miss. So sit down, buckle in, hold on, and get ready to learn. We're going to go all the way back to the beginning, and together we're going to learn what it takes to turn on one of these agents, start using it safely. Message at home. Don't try this at home accidentally, right? These things have incredible power. Kasey's going to talk a little bit about that. And with that, let's jam. I do want to just give a slight bit of background. You haven't met Kasey yet. When I first met Kasey, he was the head of procurement at Club Med down in Miami, taking care of the Caribbean. What an amazing and glorious job. But when he saw what we were doing back at Graphite, he was like, hey, I got to be part of this adventure. So I'm super happy to have him here on the team. And of course, Zach, the man of all things technology, transformation, procurement for KPMG out in London. So with that, that's plenty of introduction. We're going to get into a lot of back and forth here, but Kasey, why don't you tell us about your journey into the open, what is it now?
It's OpenClaw nowadays.
The OpenClaw agent world.
Yeah, I think so. At least it's changing relatively quickly. So I always, Conrad, you know this obviously, but since kind of the inception of LLMs, chatbots, I've been experimenting with this stuff. I've always been excited to see what's happening, what's changing, everything that's taking place. And the same thing happened with OpenClaw. I don't know what it was, probably 6 to 8 weeks ago. I was maybe a week or two late on when it really took off, but I got into it relatively quickly. I was one of those, if anybody's on social media watching the OpenClaw craze, you've probably seen, it's a little bit laughable, but everybody going to the Apple store and buying Mac Minis. In fact, my first Mac Mini was more expensive than needed because all the rest were sold out. So I couldn't resist, and I just had to get whatever worked. So that's my original Mac Mini, but I stood that one up. I'm not technical. Let's make this clear here. I'm getting more technical as we go. The most coding I do is obviously vibe coding. I really don't know what I'm doing. My first introduction to even operating a terminal was through vibe coding, Claude code, and everything else. So it's been a learning process for me, but I grabbed the Mac Mini. I had a few friends that were telling me all the transformations they were experiencing, how wild it was, all the cool stuff about it. So grabbed it, stood it up for the next few days. I think I was, probably spending 16 plus hours a day just using OpenClaw. Conrad, I'd probably send you a Slack message every few hours with some new finding I had. I even had my original OpenClaw agent set to Slack Conrad with what we accomplished every day. Basically every few hours, he was getting an update. He would Slack me when I hadn't updated him in a few hours and said, I haven't heard from your agent in a while. What do we know now? What's happening here? So it was pretty exciting. I did get a little nervous though. Initially, I was setting it up. Honestly, it kept breaking. it's improved, I don't know, 1,000x since 6 weeks ago. And I wasn't that technical. So things kept going wrong, getting a little bit discouraged, hearing all of the chatter around risks associated with OpenClaw. And I got a little bit nervous, probably conveniently, I was going on vacation. So I kind of shut it down for a week or so and then came back and I had the itch again, jumped right back in, and I was kind of mind blown at all the progress that had been made. So that was my intro. I've spent countless hours on this since then.
This is one of those technologies where if you give it more access, it's more powerful. And the more access you give it, it's more dangerous, right? So there's this weird, I want to give it more access, but I'm terrified that it's going to empty my bank accounts and give it to somebody somewhere else. Sorry, Zach, I interrupted you there.
No, I'm 2 points. One is, Kasey, I'm sure you've like felt the intensity, like given you're doing all this vibe coding and getting in the AI. There's been research recently that shows like AI enables you so much and closes the gap between what you can and can't do so much. People are finding themselves working more. So when you mentioned the 16 hours a day on OpenClaw, like I totally feel it. Like I know what you're talking about, what you've been through. I'm really excited. Yeah, I can't wait to see like what you managed to test and play around with.
What was fun, Zach, is we were with a bunch of people on Tuesday in the Bay Area, and in preparation for that, I mean, it was a last minute pivot for me. I was like, I got to bring Kasey out and introduce him to these procurement leaders because they've got to see just how easy and straightforward and powerful this is. Because as I've said on the podcast over the last few weeks, I believe this is going to change everything about procurement. And a year ago, we were talking about agentic AI and all these other things. And I was kind of like, I don't even know what it means. It feels like just another flavor of the same ice cream that we were eating, 24 months ago. But right now, this is completely different. And it will change the way that your stakeholders interact with you, the way they interact with your policy, your process, and what you have considered to be your tech stack in the past. Because as Natasha predicted, the tech stack's going to be rebuilt. I don't even think she had the insight when she said that to realize how radically that was going to be impacted by stuff that we didn't even know about, back in December, January when we recorded that episode. So Kasey, what does it take if I'm sitting down and like, hey, okay, I'm going to do this. If stop the recording, run to the Apple store, come back with a mini. What do I do now?
Yeah. So really, let's back up just a little bit. So I did exactly what you described. I ran to the Mac store, ordered it for pickup, didn't even wait for delivery, went and picked it up. And it's not overly complex. It's actually quite simple. And one of the coolest parts about doing these, one of my biggest recommendations around setting up an OpenClaw agent is to, no matter what your services you use for your AI chatbot, whether it's GPT or Gemini or Claude, whatever it is, you can actually just go set up a project inside of those services that is going to be your OpenClaw assistant and walk it through everything. That helped me so much, not being technical here. So anything it fed back in my terminal that I didn't understand, it's a copy and paste back into the project you're working on, guides you right through it, next steps. It realizes pretty quickly I'm not overly technical, and it'll just start saying, give me another screenshot. Send me a screenshot, and it just keeps fixing itself along the way. So that's really my biggest tip is you start this, but you pick up the Mac Mini, you start it up. My recommendation, I don't know if we want to go into security yet, is to at least initially set it up as its own brand new user, not associated with your Apple ID, not associated with your email. Get it set up with basic drive permissions, everything else. So you set it up, get it launched. I don't know, you're 30 minutes later, probably after you download the new software on the Mac Mini. Go to OpenClaw's website, easy to find. Obviously, there's impersonators nowadays, so make sure you find the right one. Within about 3 inches of scrolling down the page on OpenClaw, there's the command. You copy the command, take it right back to your terminal. If you're as non-technical as me, go to your control center and just type terminal. It's that simple. It'll open up for you. Copy it, paste it in there, and then it just comes alive, basically. It starts guiding you. It starts typing a bunch of prompts, catchy, funny things about its Siri's more competent cousin. It tells you all these things, and you just start walking through step by step. It guides you through the whole thing. One of the first questions or acknowledgments it makes you perform is, do you acknowledge that this is inherently risky? And you have to hit yes or no. And when you hit yes, it just keeps moving. It asks you which chat interface you want to utilize in order to communicate with it. I use Telegram. You could use iMessage, you could use Slack, you could use WhatsApp, whatever you want. And it just guides you through this entire process. It's not completely touchless your first time. I would imagine that most people will encounter a few issues here. learning which models to hook up to it. Should they do it via API key versus OAuth? There's all sorts of tips and tricks that you learn along the way. I probably, some of our more technical folks here in the office, our CTO here at Graphite, laughs when I tell him initially, I probably wiped the same Mac Mini clean 5 times to reset the process because I'm just not technical enough to understand how to isolate my different terminal folders and everything else. I would just get frustrated, wipe the whole thing, start over from the beginning. But it worked great. You learn a ton along the way.
So when you said go to your chat, that's basically you go open up your Chat GPT or your Gemini or something and say, okay, this is a project I'm going to do. I need you to walk me through this process because I've never done it before. And now you just have on your other computer, probably you have like a guide that's going to take you through this step by step.
And not even necessary, to be honest. The OpenClaw onboarding experience is relatively self-explanatory. It does guide you in plain English on how you're going to pull off this process, but I found that having that assistant alongside to help out is quite useful.
So is there any of that you want to show us right now, or you want to jump right into sort of a adolescent claw bot?
Yeah, why don't we jump into an adolescent OpenClaw bot? I think that's a great idea. I don't know if Conrad, you tell me. You know what we've accomplished here, so.
Well, did you and I were talking before about maybe showing people like the startup screens. Is that easy for you at this point, or should we? I'm fine going either direction. And Zach, like interrupt here, ask whatever questions you have. Have you done this yet? Have you jumped into the OpenClaw?
No, I've gone into the vibe coding and the workflow building and the thinking about the agentic future, and I completely know thinking about how agents are going to transform everything. From OpenClaw perspective, for me, the most interesting thing is these are computer use agents, if I'm not mistaken, right? So it's maybe that's what I'm keen to find out. Like, can it just operate my PC? Can it use my web browser? Can it use any system I give it? How do I train it to use the tools that I give it? And the big question for me is exactly what you said, Conrad. It's around, are we going to have controlled agents that are managed with different states and like in a system? Or do you just roll out agents on people's computers, and then these agents actually just go out and can do basically anything a human can on the computer, right? And I don't know yet which way the market's going to go. That's why I'm so keen to learn about OpenClaw.
Totally. And Zach, it's so interesting because the first day I set it up, I was so impressed, and it's gotten so much better that it just felt like it didn't frequently miss on tasks I was giving it. Even typical LLM chatbot prompts, I think I find myself sometimes with these agents. I have my own. His name's Anton. If anyone's watched the series Silicon Valley, that's where a lot of these OpenClaw names within Graphite are coming from. But I find myself asking him questions that afterwards I think, oh, I could have just gone to my Chat GPT license or my Gemini license and asked this question. It wouldn't have been a problem. But it's so interesting as his memory files are being updated. There's sol.md files that know things about me. I mean, I have him connected, my personal one, we use Granola for AI note taking, and they have an MCP server. So he's connected to my MCP server on Granola, and he does an incredible job at just understanding the full breadth of who I am, what I'm doing, and what I'm accomplishing. So it even feels like simple instances where you're just asking a question or doing some research. It just does so much of a better job than my chatbot instances.
Yeah, I mean, the key to success there probably, I know we want to jump into the demo ASAP, but the key to success is like the context engineering part. And so that part around where you're talking to OpenClaw, you're telling it where everything is, and it's sort of indexing and learning that stuff, and it gets better and better over time. I think that's what's really making these things super powerful. I don't know, Kasey, if you think a system is going to beat OpenClaw as an agent, because I don't think OpenClaw is a system technically, is it? It's more of a...
Yeah, you're correct.
So let's jump in. Let's see what we got. It'd be great.
I do want to be clear as well, though, as we think of this product, which is OpenClaw. I think everybody's so fascinated with OpenClaw in general right now, but let's just make it clear that you don't need OpenClaw necessarily to do the things that we're describing. You can easily do these things with just agentic workflows. But the cool thing about what we're doing with OpenClaw is that it makes it a little bit simpler for somebody like me that's maybe not as technical. It feels much simpler than the other things I've experimented in the past, which, Zach, it sounds like you have as well. You've done this with Zapier and other technologies, and it's just a little bit more complex. All right, should we jump in? Okay. This first kind of demo instance we'll show off or talk about is relatively simple, but I think that's the point here. Want to make it clear that this is not, you don't have to come out of this conversation when we talk about these things thinking, I can't do this. You can do this. It's relatively easy. So first, let me go ahead and get my screen shared. I'm going to show, we actually built, Conrad mentioned that we were in San Jose on Tuesday showing off some of these things as well. So we built a workflow that kind of helps explain how this works. So let me show that.
So when you get this workflow, Zach, you're gonna be like, oh my gosh, this is what I built a year ago for this, this same podcast.
So let's just start here. This is pretty simple. What we built and what this does, and I want to be clear that what we're about to see probably took, once I had the agent stood up, OpenClaw installed on the machine, probably an hour of time, I would say. It was really easy. It wasn't complex. With a day's work, you'll probably start seeing pretty quickly how you can have a very robust CLM process here that would be very useful. So here's what this agent does in this instance. His name's Gavin. I'll show you all the files behind what we built and fed him with, rules so that he can operate. But basically what's going to take place is we're going to upload a new contract to a drive folder inside of my drive. My OpenClaw agent, Gavin, he has Heartbeat turned on, which Heartbeat, if you're not familiar, is basically at a certain timed interval, he's going to go do something consistently. In this case, what he's doing is checking that folder, seeing if a new contract has been dropped into that folder by a human in this instance. That could obviously be automated as well in the future, but for this sake, it's a human. The next
filters, Kasey, it's like triggers, right? Same concept.
Totally. Yep. Totally. So next, what it's going to do is it's going to analyze the contract, just like a human would. A human would have some rules that they know the business is supposed to follow and analyze the contract. Next, it analyzes and finds policy exceptions. So based off the rules, which I'll show in just a second, he's going to find exceptions, or if the contract is compliant, notify the CPO. In that instance, we'll pretend that's me. Prepare an amendment. I can give him commands of what to do next, and then actually email the supplier to request changes, and then come back and finish that process out. So we'll show a couple instances of that.
Like deja vu, right, Zach?
It's very cool. Yeah, absolutely. I think that for me, it's like, okay, I did that in Zapier and it took me a day to put it together. Whereas OpenClaw, I'm guessing you could just do anything, right? Like you didn't need to spend a lot of time designing this, did you? You could just...
No. And the iterations are the awesome part. I think that's kind of the difference between probably how you did it versus this is the semantic text form and how you're building these things. You can make adjustments so quickly. I can come back to him and say, hey, we changed this rule. And when I just say that in my Telegram channel, he not only adjusts his memory inside of for that agent, but he'll say, great, I went and updated our rules document as well. So we went to my drive, found the rules document, fixed it for approval, everything else. Something else cool that I do with him that I've been doing recently is I'll give a new agent rules, because obviously how you train them is key here. And I'll actually start in Telegram and say, hey, create me a flow chart that demonstrates your understanding of the rules we put in place. And he'll actually go build a visual flow chart that I can then follow and say, okay, this makes sense. He understands, not a problem.
So that use case, Zach, I think is very interesting, because what that means is an organization that has their policies, this is who has to approve what, this is when procurement has to be involved. I mean, we've talked before about orchestration and how orchestration is really a reflection of those policies in the day-to-day. So a person doesn't have to know the policies, they just actually start the application, and the application kind of reflects, because of its workflow and everything else is doing, those policies. In this case, you could take your procurement agent and feed it all of your corporate policies, and it would put it in its memory and its brain very quickly, ask it for what contradictions, issues, and problems do I have in my policy that need to be resolved. It would tell you, because it's already kind of built it into this whole workflow and its understanding. And it's like, okay, so show me what my policy workflow looks like before you even build any workflow for your agent. It's like, okay, what does the policy indicate the workflow is? And that does something like what I think Kasey's going to show you here.
Well, and even imagine, Conrad, if we go back and you're a smaller procurement organization or a new procurement organization, you can utilize Gavin in this instance to actually build those documents, to actually establish the plan and then execute upon the plan.
Create your policy based on how you want your process to work.
I see you going a little bit just a touch further than that. Like you could basically use AI and agents and Gavin to scale your FTEs in procurement without hiring, right? Especially if you're a small business.
Yep. We're experiencing that as well. So let me jump back over here. We're going to be in Slack just a little bit because he's going to talk to us in Slack. But first, kind of the initial piece of this one. And like I said, this is a relatively simple use case we're going to show off here. But we built, Gavin and I built contract analysis and workflow automation instructions for the agent. Sometimes these will look a little bit different than instructions you would give a human. But like Conrad mentioned, it's pretty awesome. You could take a large enterprise will have so much data around their policies, hopefully, and he can then digest that, and it doesn't have to be formatted the same way, but in a way that's understandable by the agent. So we built this. Conrad, I'm guessing we don't want to read line by line, but the point is he understands what he's supposed to accomplish, where he's supposed to put data, what the different rules are for non-compliant contracts, compliant contracts, communication rules, things like he's not allowed to send emails without creating a draft in Slack, all of those things for approval. So he does all of that.
So this,
I mentioned
just so nobody's confused about this. This looks like you might have got writer's block 25 times and spent 3 days typing this document. Like, what did it take you to put this document together?
I don't know, 10 minutes, maybe less, probably a couple iterations with the agent where we got to the point where I agreed. And I probably, giving you a look behind the covers here, I probably haven't actually read every word of what is built here because he's so good at creating flowcharts based off what I wanted him to do. Like, for example, I copy and pasted this one down here because he did this. It's probably hard to read with the size, but this is what he really does is we talk through what the rules need to be, and I don't even have to go read the whole thing. It's so much easier to understand it by saying, okay, create a flowchart based off your knowledge of the rules. And then I walk through every step of this flowchart. I don't really need to go study this. I know that he nailed it. You can do this. This is one example we're demonstrating, but think about anything you do across the organization. Flowcharts are so helpful in these instances, especially when there's so much training documentation that you have no clue if he understood what the process is. You really need to visualize it. So that part's pretty awesome. Great. So let's go test this guy out. So first, like we mentioned, the first step in this process we'd established is we're going to go to my drive. I got to go get there now. I got a little distracted here. So we'll go to my drive. We're going to go in here to new contracts. This is where I had me and Gavin actually create 2 contracts. I don't remember which one's compliant, which one's not compliant. I don't remember what the issues are, but let's go move some of these into Gavin's inbox. So I'm just going to take them over to Gavin's inbox. We're going to move them over there. So like we mentioned, he's on a heartbeat schedule. So he's thinking about this. Could take anywhere from 2 seconds, dependent off the heartbeat schedule, to 30 seconds. So we'll wait a second here in Slack, and he's going to execute. So a little bit of silent time here. But he also, something I didn't mention that he's doing that's pretty cool is he's analyzing, and then there's actually a Google sheet where he's keeping track of all contracts, stages, everything else that's taking place, all the metadata around what's happening. So he's actually documenting and tracking that as well.
So your use case last year, Zach, just like inspired, like, okay, let's take the metadata out of the contract. Let's go put it in a spreadsheet. That could be a database. Again, this is like 90 minutes of building on Kasey's part to actually make this work. But there, if he turned this into, let's say, 2 days, after doing this with him, I have little doubt I could actually create a very strong, workable CLM, platform for me to use in my procurement organization.
Yep, totally. So I've got him started up.
You're on mute, Zach. I don't think we heard that last one.
I was going to say, I think the ironclads of the world are finished. Like, contract CLM type things, agents can just, can do it like out of the box, right?
Yeah, well, it's going to be really tricky. It'll be, back to your original question we started, is this going to be agents inside the applications, agents at an enterprise level, both? Like, how's that ecosystem going to evolve? It'll be very interesting to watch. Because I don't think procurement teams are necessarily all going to want to go do this, but the idea that you're going to have to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for a contract lifecycle system, it just won't hold the ROI anymore when you could hire one of your team members to spend 2 weeks and get something that's, 80 to 90% of everything you need anyway.
Actually, what this is reminding me of is IDEs. I don't know if, Kasey, you've used them, like Cursor and Windsurf, etc. but they do very similar things. So an IDE is basically a little terminal, but then you also build your repo for your application, right? And AI is sort of there in the chat, and it controls your repo, and it writes your files, and it can do drawings of the architecture and like how things work and flows. And that's basically what vibe coding's turned into. I haven't written a line of code before, but I can build pretty complex like applications. But where I find you actually start to hit a wall is when you get to these, like when you want to cater for all the edge cases. So if you have a big procurement team, right, or you buy loads of different things, you got to start thinking of all the different edge cases. And then it's like almost like you telling Gavin every time an edge case shows up to update the process with this edge case. And it starts to affect performance after a while because of the context limits and things like that. So, you enter this new realm of like, how do you actually create the reasoning layer in an efficient way that's token efficient, that's latency efficient. Yeah, it's just, but it's super cool to see that someone's created a product where you don't even need an IDE anymore. Like it just runs on your computer and it does exactly the same thing, and access files and stuff out of the box.
Yeah, well, and I think that opens up a question. I mean, the reality is, and having done a bunch of procurement technology implementations over time, and now working on a team that there are a bunch of edge cases. So if you think 80 to 90% is pretty typical, and then you have a couple of things that pop up here and there. If your process and technology design and strategy is we're going to have technology that deals with 100% of the edge cases in an automated way or in a totally system way, that's going to be a very expensive proposition. Whether you're hiring, Ironclad or you're DocuSign or you're building it yourself, like you're saying, you're just going to create incredible complexity. So for me, and maybe it's because I just think the universe was built around the principle of 80-20, you've got to be really mindful of where you draw that line and say, these edge cases, it's actually easier and better for me just to pull them out of the automation flow, deal with it, and then reinsert them when it makes sense instead of try and monkey around with the whole workflow and the automation to deal with the 75 edge cases that happen once every 5 years. Like so I wouldn't necessarily say you update Gavin on every single one. Like you said, you got to be mindful of which of these things are worth, because it isn't a once every 5 years. Maybe it's a once every 5 weeks, something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know, Kasey, if you're ready to go. Otherwise, I'll just keep talking. But
close. Keep talking. Random. It will this. Like sometimes it's a cloud outage.
So you said IDE, Kasey. I'm not sure, Zach. I'm not sure I really understand what that is. Like what is that acronym?
Integrated development environment. It's basically what coders use to build applications, right? It's actually, it's a long-standing thing. It's just now these tools like Cursor, etc., have agents that run the IDE for you. So they'll code for you inside that IDE, and so you can run they can run your terminal commands. They can create your repository, your coding repository, basically. Cursor, for example, has a Cursor rules bit. In case you mentioned rules and updating a rules file. So having a rules file that gets updated and, and managing the context so the agent doesn't go off track. But yeah, it is difficult, honestly. After a while, you get so much context. You've got to like really think about how the agent gets better at handling context, and not because the agent will forget what it built.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
things that it's done.
This is a really great point, right? Because if you think about procurement as a function, like a big function here, and jump in, Kasey, when you're ready, but you have procurement as a big function. Part of it is contracts, part of it is sourcing, part of it is like maybe transaction, maybe status. I mean, you go out and you identify the 6 to 12 different sort of sub functions inside of procurement. You could architect and say, I'm going to put all of that into an agent. I think we're evolving to a place because of what you just described. The agent you build needs to be exceptionally clear and smart around this thing, trying to make them into a generalist that can do everything. Just like a human, once you ask them to do everything, they're just not as deep and capable in the one thing that you might be asking them to do next. So I think you're going to end up with this stack of agents that work together, just like you have an org chart of people today, because you have this specialization that's required for, and maybe in 5 or 10 years, just the brain size of these things changes. And so maybe you need fewer agents but for right now, it feels a lot like kind of real people.
Yeah. I mean, this was possible today, and absolutely right. The 80-20 principle is such a good one to think about when you're starting out. But I'm trying to think about 5 years in the future, 10 years in the future. Do I see agents running all the procurement? I mean, it's a bit of a mind game, brain experiment, right? But I mean, the way things are going and the capabilities, and you're absolutely right, Conrad. You need to build all that out. You need multiple agents, but to the user, they're not going to deal with multiple. They're just going to deal with one agent that all these agents that control different things. But you're right. It's a much harder step up. But I do see that's how the evolution of technology is going to go because things like OpenClaw are readily available. So the next question becomes, okay, I hit 80%. Like, what's the next level of efficiency? What's the next level of performance? How do I get even more out? How do I get even more value? Do the more strategic stuff. And for that, you need to build more and more and more on top of that. But equally, AI just keeps getting better and better. So I'm not even sure if you're building anything today, you're barely keeping up with like Anthropic and OpenAI and stuff.
Well, I mean, you're leaning on those, right? Because you're building on top of those models, and as they get better, you're getting better because of where that your OpenClaw isn't living in itself, right? It's referring to these underlying models as well. I mean, so my piece of advice after working with Kasey here for a couple of weeks and really jamming on this is and Kasey mentioned, like, I'm slacking him. Okay, what are you guys doing today? What have you found? What have you learned? Because in the last like 6 hours since I talked to him last, I thought about 5 different little things we could have an agent do. Like literally, I think we probably have a list of 30 to 50 things we want to figure out how to automate in our business with agents. And poor Kasey's over here working 18 hours a day, loving it, but it really requires focus. Just like back, before any of this technology, what are we trying to accomplish? What's the automation that we need? Okay, we're going to focus in on a business case, a business problem, and manage it forward into like, okay, how do I solve that now? What are the rules? Build the kind of document or process expectations like Kasey showed before, get that to it's a workable place where we can start using it and then learn and iterate on it, in more of a live production environment than just in the garage.
All right. I think I'm about there to go for 10 more seconds.
All right.
This is a perfect example of how you have to vibe code your way through these things.
We did a data project internally for one of our prospects that basically analyzed a million rows of data, and it would have taken one of our team members, I don't know, I guess 3 to 5 days maybe to really go through and clean it up and get it to the state that it was in. And the agent was able to understand what we were trying to do, actually write Python code in the background without us asking, because it just understood the outcome we were looking for. Like you're saying, in terms of having an environment where it can go create automation and code that's needed to get to that outcome. And it's like, oh, okay, I know how to do that. We'll just go over here. We'll write some Python code. We'll do this. I like, don't even need to know all of that stuff that it's doing. And then it brings it back to this outcome. And you're like, holy bejeebers. Like this is better than any of our people could do. And this was done in, less than an hour, with a couple iterations to final cleanup. It was pretty stunning.
It is, yeah. I think if you think about like the more complex things, like one thing I've run into, for example, is getting an LLM to do TCO type stuff, total cost of ownership, or like anything that's like complicated, should cost modeling, etc. I realized I was making a lot of maths mistakes. It would present the answer very confidently, and so I started to read it to like, how do you get it to do numbers really well? And it turns out it's like 2 steps. There's probably better ways to do it, but step 1 is like take the numbers out, extract them, label them, and then actually give it access to Python to actually do the calculations in Python, right? So you don't need to, and that's how you get closer to getting the right answer. One thing I will say is like through all these like hours and whatever vibe coding and building and testing stuff, always double check because the agent will present you with something that looks right. Every time you look at it, you'll be like, it won't strike you as immediately wrong, but you go through it in detail and you start to pick up, wait, hang on, where did that what's driving this exact sentence in its response? Why did it give me that number? That number doesn't look right, etc. And that's going to be all part of, I think, a discipline called, evaluations, which obviously AI companies do today. But I think all companies are going to have to do that, because if you run this Claude agent, you want to be able to see the outputs, evaluate it, capture where it's not been perfect or hasn't behaved exactly as you expected, and feed that back in. Now, OpenClaw's got an element of that already with the learning loop, yeah, like the technology is like huge here. Like there's so much going on there. There's so many different frameworks and approaches, and the research is constantly being pushed out. So it's gonna get like it's gonna be a lot of complexity to a lot of this in the future. But the speed things are moving is just phenomenal.
Yeah.
Absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to go drop one of these two contracts into Gavin's inbox. One of them's compliant, one of them is not. I'm not even sure what the non-compliant issues are, but we'll go drop it over here, and he's going to start that heartbeat feature where he is pulling this folder here every 30 seconds. So let's jump back over to Slack and see what we get. It'll take just a second. There's a few different steps that he's following here, like we mentioned earlier, where he's not only analyzing the contract, but updating our data set to make sure that all of this analysis is there so that we can watch it in the future and work off of it. So he's coming. Give him a few seconds.
Is this an agent I can watch on my Slack as well, Kasey?
Yeah, he will respond to you at one point here. So that will be coming. Gavin was working the entire time. It was just the wrong Slack folder. So that's the situation here. So what took place is Gavin sent us over the analysis of what he did here on the contract. So he basically came back and said, there's one violation after my analysis. Payment terms exceed net 30, net 45. Payment terms must be net 30 maximum. So at this point, I could give him several commands. The command I'm going to give him is email the vendor and request updates to the contract. Great. So he composed an email here. Obviously, a dummy vendor contact we're emailing, but letting him know that there's an error here, that something's out of compliance and that we need an update made. So he composes the email. It's ready. These agents will actually you can even program them to give you like buttons where you don't even have to free type anymore. So I'll approve and send. We'll send this out. He'll come back and tell us it's done. Awesome. So remediation request is sent. If we went into my inbox, it would actually show he did send an email there. I'm probably going to get a callback on a failed email address, but he did send the email. So there's one example. Let's go back into our drive again and give him another one. So here's a second.
So of course that was a pretty, Zach, that's a pretty simple example where we're just sending an email, right? But for Gavin to draft a formal legalese sort of amendment based on the current contract, signature blocks and all that stuff, like this is not rocket science. That's just that extra 3 or 4 hours. Again, this is the 60 to 90 minute build version versus the 3-day build version.
Yeah,
totally.
But also saving so much time. Like, can you imagine like just drafting the email and sending it? Someone like me, I have this habit of like procrastinating admin stuff. I don't like doing this admin stuff and thinking even using an LLM to write it. Like the fact that just proactively suggested an email and then just had a little button where I could just send or edit. Like that's going to make procurement teams so much more powerful, right? You just don't need to worry about all this administrative stuff anymore. And that's, I think, what holds people back, right? It's what keeps people stuck. So it's a huge, I think, opportunity.
So if we think back, Zach and Conrad, to that, initially we showed the workflow of what Gavin's going to do here. This second example we sent is compliant. So Sterling Industrial Supply, compliant. Here's why. Here's what took place. The cool part here is now when we approve for legal, instead of sending an email, that's why Conrad was getting pinged when I wasn't getting pinged in Slack. He was in the correct channel. He Slacked Conrad. We're pretending Conrad's legal in this instance. Telling him that the contract's ready for signature. So now it's in his hands. Obviously, it would be very simple for us to add additional steps to his process where he could do other things, where we could automate this process, or what's next, or what's he doing. There's other compliance reviews that need to take place on this vendor. He could easily be firing that off to anyone we need in that instance. So
Kasey's like, where you're talking about the adding steps to the process, that's just adding another line in the prompt, isn't it? Like, and this is right. Is this what you mean?
Correct. Like, totally. Yep. Semantic text.
So a couple of things I think to think about, and I know for a lot of our listeners, I don't know, it depends on how deep they are into agents. But if you look at the old workflow builders, like are those all dead now? Because I could just replace the entire workflow with like a stepped numbered list of steps and process notes and stuff like that. Like I don't need to document and have a process flow where I'm taking data from here, putting it there, putting it there. I'm just literally writing a prompt and saying, these are the steps. And I'm giving the agent the flexibility or autonomy to decide how they get to the outcome. So the process is sort of like, it's a suggestion, kind of like it would be for a human, right? It's like, yes, I need to follow the process, but equally I need to get to the outcome. Whereas in the systems world, it's like, oh, process is stuck here. Come help me unstick this, unglue this. Whereas with agents, like they feel a lot more like people, they act a lot more like people. So the process is more guidance. And when I talk to clients about how the operating model of the future is going to change for procurement, I always tell them, like, look at the process layer, less important, right? It's more about outcomes now. It's not about defining your step-by-step process with 200 process maps or whatever. Like, we just don't need that anymore, right? Be pragmatic about how you set up the agent.
No, I think there's a couple layers to that, right, Zach? I mean, a year ago when people were talking about agentic workflow and even the stuff that you were kind of showing in Zapier a year ago, I was like, well, I expect policy rules to be built into the workflow. Like, I don't want the agent just guessing whether, Zach or Kasey or Conrad is going to approve it this time. Like, some of these things are not guessable in terms of, it's not optional. You don't get to choose. You just need to do what's right. So these are the boundary conditions, the guardrails, the things that have to happen, but the agent can understand those things. And, in the past, even with workflow tools, all the fancy new orchestration ones where it's got a lot of drag and drop workflows and everything like that, like, drag and drop was so yesterday, like, because seriously now you can just come in and say, well, I need to add an approver after legal under these conditions, blah, blah, blah. And it just like takes that text, puts it into their own kind of brain language, updates that rules document or, the process there, updates the flow chart, just kind of, you're interacting now with the application, designing it, testing it, building it, essentially just with simple chat. I mean, we've all been doing generative AI chat for, a while now, but instead of just getting answers and research back, it's like, it's this blend of vibe coding, but also process management and automation that it's really very cool.
It feels to me that my prediction is that there's going to be a huge impact to what you described, Conrad, which is orchestration. How beautiful is this going to be? And you touched on this when all these policy documents, rules around an organization are just in one of these agents, and you now perform your work tasks or are guided to your work tasks through semantic text inside of a chat window. For us at Graphite, that's Slack. That's where our internal agents live, but it's so smooth when he knows all of these policies. I no longer need to go have 16 browsers open at all times, saved, bookmarked tabs to go figure all these things out. He just guides me throughout that process. It's incredibly smooth.
It absolutely. Just a thought experiment. So I want to understand like the constraints here. Maybe you haven't tested them or we haven't gotten there, but let's say I have 6 policies. I have a task that involves looking at 6 different policies. So I guess it depends on the size of the task. Like the task you gave Gavin now was like, hey, we're going to contract, and these are the things you're looking for, and it was manageable. What I found is as you layer more and more into the context window, and more context are blowing up all the time, but if you put more rules in there, then mistakes start to happen. And if Gavin needs to look at across 6 policy documents, how does it work in OpenClaw? Like is Gavin going to spawn a bunch of smaller agents that each one is looking at a policy, or is Gavin going to try and look across all 6 policies? Because the former will probably give you a better quality answer than the latter, right?
And this has been a ton of the trial and error I've actually gone through. That's one of the coolest things about operating in this OpenClaw environment. Not that like a Claude cowork can't do these things as well, but surely your chat window in ChatGPT will struggle with what you described. First off, yes, absolutely. If I was building a more complex process, and many times you'll find, especially when you're running the more capable models inside of OpenClaw, they will suggest this nearly every single time. But the key is to, you have for this example, Gavin is the boss of these sub-agents, and then we deploy sub-agents that specialize at one thing. I learned quickly deploying these OpenClaw agents that what makes them so special is how much context you can give them, but at the same time, they do tend to miss the mark much more frequently when they have access to the entire system and there's one brain behind everything that's taking place. So totally, there should be subagents in all of these processes that kick off in order to accomplish these tasks. Makes a huge difference.
I always make this clear to like clients now, and I know clients are still like trying to catch up to like where agents are at and stuff. I say if there's one thing you got to know is the context engineering part. It's about giving the agent exactly the context it needs to do the best job it can, but no less, and definitely no more. Because even if you give more, you're gonna veer it off. So that's part of the art of designing these agents. Like, how do you feed them just exactly the right amount of context at the right point in the process to get the right answer bang on every time, right? Without them hallucinating and making mistakes.
Well, and just to add to that, Zach, Conrad, quickly, the last thing you want to do with these agents is give them so much data that you ask them a simple question. Let's say we have like our help desk agent inside of Slack, and I ask him a question about how to do something inside of our application. And he now goes through this process of first, let me query Zendesk, and then let me query this tool, and then this tool, and this tool, and this tool until he finds the end result. It's much better in those instances when we can say, kick off your sub agent that specializes in that specific instance to answer the question. It's so much smoother. It also is much less token intensive than sending the complex model out to search everything at once.
And the answers are way faster. By the way, like the cost and the latency, like until I got deep into building like complex, I didn't realize how important those are. I have blown through literally $200 in a single day, just, process, because I've realized like it depends on what you're doing. And so I think these costs are really going to scale up as you roll out more of these agents if you're not careful about managing the context and also the model. So I noticed, for example, when you use Gavin there, when you asked him like to do the review, the draft email, it responded in under 2 seconds. So for me, it's definitely like a haiku model or some kind of smaller model that can draft email. But you wouldn't use that model for a more complicated task. You want to use a big model, but that's going to cost more and take longer, right? And if you're doing an end-to-end process, you can lose people. Like, it just take you ages to get. It'll still be faster than a person doing it, but I think people will quickly adapt to the new baseline, and they'll be like, "I want it done right now." Like why is this spinning for so long? Like just
I could go like 2 hours deep on this. That's like the really cool part about these subagents is the subagents could all be using a different model. That's probably overkill, but they will use different models based off what their task is assigned to do. It's not only quicker, less token intensive, and then that overarching brain, for example, I think mine's running on Opus 4.6 right now. And then everything else is running on a Sonnet model or something else in those instances. He'll actually come back to me and say, this project is more complex. Can I use Opus? And I approve him to go use it in those instances, but he defaults to a much more cost-effective model. Sometimes I'll just say, you're missing this. Like, let's go to Opus. Go back to Opus. And it's magical what they solve in those moments.
You ever meet someone where like you ask a simple question and they give you like, they just go on for like 8 minutes. You don't need that. Like, but that's what Opus will do, right? Like, you'd be like, hey, review this contract for like this one thing. And the Opus be like, all right, here you go. And I'm like, Opus, chill out. Like, I just need it.
Yeah, exactly.
We Kasey and I listened to this podcast, and he was actually talking about the cost of all of these agents actually starting to cost more than the people, right? And so it becoming a material, I don't want to say HR, right? Because these are agents, but it's a material cost associated with the automation that's being delivered that really needs to be thoughtfully engineered, right? Because as you said, you may end up spending $50,000 or $100,000 a year to automate somebody's job that they were doing it for $80,000 a year or something. Like, you just need to kind of see that and not have it be invisible in the background in terms of what's happening. But so I want to just acknowledge something here, because both of you are smarter than me in these agents, like miles above me. And I don't know how Kasey went from, managing hotels in the Caribbean to like being the agent god at Graphite, over the course of like 12 days. But it's pretty cool. So, but all of this talk, like, we have procurement people that are listening to the podcast today. Some of them have probably just had their brain just melted a little because we're using words and models and all these things that sound completely intimidating to most people. Kasey, before we quit, can you just pop back over there and just show somebody how easy it is to update the process that you just showed them? Like, because I think all this talk makes this sound wildly complicated. And if you're that procurement person, I mean, we've been promised for 30 years I've been here that procurement people are now going to be able to administer this technology and you don't need IT. And, frankly, even in this case, that's, you're working in an enterprise and the enterprise is not going to smile upon you launching a Mac Mini and putting an agent in the middle of their, in the middle of their security bubble. Like, this isn't going to fly. So you need to understand what your boundaries are with your IT and your enterprise organization. Some of the learning that Kasey's nudging you here, you probably, like, if you want to be leading and relevant, 2 to 3 years from now, you probably need to go buy your own Mac Mini, take it home and start doing this learning on your own. If people are telling you no at work, but you can totally do this. Show us, Kasey, share your screen and kind of go, these are 2 or 3 updates. Zach, maybe be thinking of like, what would you want to update in his process flow? A couple of comments, the process flow, the rules get updated.
Yeah, I'm even going to do it a little bit different than that, Conrad. We're going to try something
share your
slightly
screen
different
again so we can follow you along. And then we'll wrap it up. I want to kind of get to practical here because, like I said, I think most people are kind of going, oh my gosh, I don't know how am I even going to get started? We started a little bit in the beginning with how to start, but I want people to you should not be intimidated by this stuff. You should start figuring it out.
Yeah, and I think I just want to tag very quickly on the back of that, Conrad. I raise these concepts because and I appreciate they're quite complicated and they can feel intimidating. If anyone has any question whatsoever, we're wide open for your question. Please reach out, ask. I'm happy to take the time to explain things. So yeah, you're absolutely right, Conrad. We shouldn't be going too deep into the technical side, but that's where the magic happens, to be honest with you.
Well, and what I mean, my message is the technology isn't so terrifying that you can't get there. Like, the bar is low enough now that if you have a desire to invest a few hours, you can figure this out. Like, this isn't, I'm going to be like slammed all weekend. If you're slammed all weekend, it's because you're starting to giggle with how much fun you're having with this technology because you are now capable.
Without question. And I would say, like, I've had a lot of people that I've trained up in my firm, and within 2 weeks, they're on the same language curve, basically, right? We're all talking about the same kinds of things. So yeah, get stuck in and do not be afraid. You will pick it up very quickly. What Kasey said at the beginning is super important. The agent will guide you. The LLM will guide you, right? You do not need to do a lot of research and reading and buy books. Like, just ask the agent. But yeah, back to you, Kasey. Sorry.
Perfect. So Conrad, I'm actually going to do this. I'm going to go off script a little bit. I'm going to do this a little bit different than what you requested. I'm actually in a different agent right here. And I actually just want to show how simple, I think I'll be able to demonstrate exactly what you're saying, but as well just how simple this process is. So I took that exact same file we had created for the separate agent. This agent isn't doing these things. He's actually meant to do something else, but I want to show how simple this really is. So I'm going to give him a prompt here that says, using this file inside my drive, please learn the rules and reply back. Sometimes I catch myself saying please a little bit too much to agents, but it does become a habit eventually.
We named our internal agent Carl, Zach, because that's Conrad, Aaron, Russ, and Laura, 4 of the founding team members. And I just felt like I needed to tell Carl, the agent, that his or her name was really meaningful. So I stopped and I chatted a little chat, and it was like, wow, like, that's really meaningful. And it's like, I feel really special. I'm part of the company culture, and like, it was pretty fun. He said a few things, and then he at the end of his thing, he inserted an emoji that was a rock, and it almost looked like the little turd emoji, but it was gray instead of brown. And I was like, okay, so you need to understand another thing, which is graphite is carbon and carbon is a diamond. Under enough heat and pressure, like at graphite, we're all trying to become diamonds. And so you shouldn't be using these rock emojis. Like, diamonds are where it's at. Like, and it's your job to help every employee in this company realize their potential to become a diamond. And so, yeah, like with 3 or 4 little sentences there, now Carl, I don't know if this is Carl or not, but Carl became the diamond emoji hound, started driving Kasey crazy. Because
it is. You can see it right there where it's, hey, Kasey, diamond.
That's so cool. By the way, I would not underplay what you did there, Conrad, at all. These agents are going to need to absorb company culture, reflect company culture, and yeah, they're gonna feel like employees. So yeah, that's like awesome that you did that.
Okay, talk us through this, Kasey.
Yeah, so I gave him the Google Doc, obviously, that we've been working off of. He ingested it, he learned from it, told us what he's going to do in this instance. I actually asked him, I wanted to demonstrate this process of asking him to create a flowchart. One of like the cool things that takes place with these agents, these OpenClaw agents, is initially when you stand up one of these agents, normally they don't even have the functionality to create flowcharts. But when you ask them to do something like this, they quickly say, I can't do this right now, but do I have permission to download this so that I can do this? And he actually just goes and you approve, you review what he's asking to do, and then he has the capability to actually design in this way. So that's pretty awesome as well. But I want to show that he understands the process here, just like what I've been doing. Flowcharts are a little bit more time intensive, so he's creating that. And then after, we're going to go ask him to make some updates here. So let's let him think for a second. I think in the meantime, though, while he's formulating our flowchart, he told us here, and Zach and Conrad, I'll put this one on you. He told us our risk factors. There were only 7 risk factors here that he was identifying, or a few more based off criticality. What is something we could have him go update in the document? What are some other risk factors we think he can consider? Or think of it a second way. Another way I thought about this is we could actually just ask him in this moment, what are we missing? Like imagine you're a newer procurement team. So let's do it one of 2 ways. Either what are you missing, or should we just tell him a specific thing to go update? Thoughts? So somebody give me the prompt here.
Do we already have so this is pretty cool? First, I mean, this is not necessarily like a Visio flowchart, but that it was able to take the document and create this flowchart out of the document is pretty cool.
Yeah, and one more prompt would be make it visually appealing. That would be simple in that instance, not complicated. So let me actually ask him. I think this is interesting. I'll ask him this one last question here. Based on our rules, what do you think we are missing? Propose 2 more critical items we should analyze.
This is so cool.
And he does an awesome job with these things, especially when they're stood up. As you open up a new instance of OpenClaw, he's going to be this contract worker or a procurement agent, whatever you decide. Make sure he understands that's who he is and the expert he is. It really helps guide those agents to search the right places, understand the right information. So let's let him think here for a second.
It just stuns me how people like this whole thing translates into. And it makes me wonder if that the human nature of these agents is because their DNA is human language, right? Human language, history, and content. Like all of that is really the DNA behind the training, the models, everything. It is human. It's not like it's, something else. And so our personalities, who we are, like how humans think, how they interact, their ability to do stupid things and make mistakes. They need training. They need reminders. They need quality checking. They need a supervisor. Like all of that stuff that we see in the human world has a direct parallel that we're seeing already in the agentic world.
Yeah, and you saw it like with the launch of ChatGPT, right? That moment of wow, this sounds like a person, and I still get it. And sometimes there's just something amazing, and I go, wow. Or like Kasey, like I think you asked it a question earlier, but you weren't very like clear with your question, but it still understood what you meant, right? That layer, I think the DNA layer, Conrad, is what makes these things amazing to me. Like just the fact they can understand us so well. And dangerous potentially.
Yeah. So Kasey, this is now giving you some suggestions back.
Yep. And I took number 2 here where he said intellectual property ownership and work product assignment. Nothing in the current rules address IP. So he gave us an example. I'm actually going to go tell him, please go add number 2 in the rules document. So he's going to go update his rules that he utilizes in order to perform this task. So he'll go in there and update the Google Doc. Do a great job on that. You could then imagine if we implemented, 6 changes that he recommended, which he easily could, recreate me a flowchart again so that I can understand that this process is working, go right into a testing phase in this moment. And Slack does an amazing job. If you're a Slack workforce, or I'm sure other technologies as well, of creating these agents, it's so easy to give them the right permissions, where the next step in this process, if I was standing up a new Gavin, basically is what we're doing here, is he actually, and this is one of my favorite parts, is I would say, okay, we need to set you up as a Slack agent that our company can interact with, guide me through the process, provide links. And he actually gives me step-by-step process with just clickable links that takes me to the next step of the process as I build that Slack agent, which I hadn't done in the past before.
So if you wanted to connect this, you and I have been talking, I want to do this. I want to connect one to my LinkedIn to kind of help me stay on top of messages and things like that. I can just ask it to tell me how the best way to connect back into LinkedIn would be, right? And it will guide me through that process.
Totally. So if we come in here, we should be able to find, I need to remember one of the
intellectual property is what it was going to do, right?
Right here. So he went and added our new rule right there around what needs to take place. So he does an incredible job doing that, just really assisting you across the process. And the nice part about telling the agents to update documentation is they update documentation with the knowledge that they need to work off what they're updating instead of me going into Google Docs and updating things in a way.
Okay, so let's just carry this to the next level. So it said, hey, you need to do this, but Zach's in charge of our intellectual property legal stuff. So when a contract violates that, you need to add a review with Zach to that step of the process. Like this is that whole workflow building that we were doing at Zapier a year ago, Zach. Like this is it. Like just chat, just tell it, and
way more fun way to build and work with than Zapier.
That's what to me it's just stunning. Like the bar is low enough now that that even I can get excited about spending the weekend doing this. And I want to kind of I want to go a little bit strategic in terms of where I think this is going to go and why I would make this claim. And then I want to come back and get back to practical and wrap up on practical. But if you have, I don't know, if you have somebody in your business that needs to buy something, right? The idea that they could take a picture of one that's broken, they could go to Slack, they could upload this to the purchasing agent and say, I need a replacement for this, or I need to buy one of these. That agent would be able to know who's my preferred supplier, what's the process. It's over $500,000, so I need Kasey to do an RFP, and like all of that is understood. I don't think that our common users are going to be interacting with procurement through Ariba or Coupa or Zip or any of that. I think whatever the standard messaging environment in the enterprise is, whether it's Teams or Slack or whatever it is, they're just going to say to the procurement channel, I need another one of these by Friday, or, I need one of these. And then that interaction will just start. And similar to today's orchestration, where it has pre-coded questions, what are you trying to buy? How much you're trying to spend? Instead of that all being pre-coded and pre-designed, it's just going to ask you the questions it needs to have enough context to know what it's got to do next.
Totally. I actually think, Conrad, not to get off that point, but I think this was actually an awesome response he gave to me. Zach, you obviously don't work at Graphite. This agent in this instance has access to two things. First, our Slack directory and also our org chart. So he actually came back when I said, when a contract violates this new rule, message Zach and said, before I add this, who's Zach? I don't have him in the team directory.
Isn't that freaking cool?
Should I tag him in procurement agent? So he went through a few processes here. He basically told me, you didn't give me enough information. I don't know who Zach is. Had I said Aaron, our co-founder, he would have gone and found Aaron, but he doesn't know who Zach is. And the second thing he said is, I didn't tell him how he should tag Zach. Currently in our flowchart and process, he's slacking. We have a channel, procurement agent, and he's slacking me as the CPO and Conrad as legal. He was actually asking, should I also add Zach to that Slack channel so that we keep it all in one place? So he really I could have led him astray there, and he really understood and is guiding us here.
Yeah. Well done, Gavin.
It's like just having a super smart assistant helping you do all the random stuff that you need help with, whether it's coding, process, policy, whatever.
I want to say like that thing that Gavin just did around who's Zach, that's exactly the kind of thing that you're getting with the improvement of the underlying models, right? So the underlying model is so good that Gavin will just flag things like that without you having to prompt Gavin to do something like that. And so that's when we talk about that, and that general intelligence layer is going to get so good. But then if you want to build a procurement specific intelligence layer that does need a next level of expertise, Claude and Anthropic are going after finance, legal, and a whole bunch of things. I don't think procurement's going to make it on their list, to be honest, because it's a 10 billion software market versus 150 billion for cybersecurity, for example. So there's a lot of opportunity here, and I think companies will need to think about how to build that procurement layer. But this stuff is so good as well. Like just be able to be smart in general.
Zach, I think somebody in IT is going to be able to go, here's our procurement tech stack policy and process. And within a week or two, essentially take an OpenClaw out of the box and stand up an agent that understands all of that stuff. Independent of one of these large organizations really like honing the model in, like it will be we have trained the OpenClaw on complexity that blows my mind. Like within minutes, it understands things that takes our team months and months to learn and comprehend. Like a stunning amount of complexity. I'm ready to do something with this. What do you want me to do? Like it is really interesting, and I'm really excited how it's going to change things. So that's kind of the vision, the strategy, and the impact. And I'm sure in our next podcast, Zach, we're set up to talk more about the operating model of the future. I'm positive this conversation is going to flow into that one because the future operating model has to comprehend agents and automation.
So a few things. Doing what you just did gets you 80%, like Conrad said, right? Skills gets you another 10, right? But if you keep that trajectory on, I don't know yet what the answer is. My suspicion is that building an integrated stack of these agents that are seamlessly designed to work together and can plug in with other agents, but really you've got the end-to-end. I feel like that is going to be the most performant. The question that Conrad raised, I think, is really valuable is how performant do you need it to be, right? But if I take it all the way and I think about, okay, procurement is running on a computer, right? It can't afford to make any mistakes. It needs to handle every edge case. So I think that's like the next frontier. I don't know. I'm trying to think like 5 years ahead.
Listen, my buddy over at Google introduced me to how they're doing orchestration. They basically built this user experience layer on top of procurement. And he said there's an awful lot of swivel chair behind the curtain of that really beautiful layer. I think this is going to be a process where you sort of say, if procurement just says, okay, folks, you never need to log into Coupa or Ironclad or Zip or any of these other things again. You just talk to us. You just send us a message and we'll take care of things. Behind the scenes, that can go to Kasey and he can manually go do a bunch of work. Right. So these edge cases can be dealt with manually, and even like we can iterate from 0 to 40% to 80% to 90%, like building in these agents in the background to do the automation, even with dials, right? So that if it's like, well, actually, once it crosses $100,000, I don't want the agent to just do it. I want the agent to do it with Kasey, right? So there's a whole bunch of stuff you can do behind the curtains, but the end user just says, hey, folks, I need one of these. Like, get it for me. And it's like, oh, well, you don't actually need my help. Just go to this link, use your credit card, and you're done. Like, boom. Okay, that's cool. I'm done. But hey, I need one of these, and it's new HR software, and it costs, $750,000. It's like, hey, awesome news. We've got Kasey. He's our HR software category manager. He's going to walk you through this process. Kasey could be an agent. It could be a sub agent. It could be Kasey. It could be a combo of an agent and Kasey, like that kicks in and says, okay, cool. Let's write an RFP. Talk to me about what your business requirements are. Why are you doing this? What are you trying to achieve? What are the outcomes? And all of that. Down the road, like you're saying, I think all of that can be very automated. But in the beginning, you don't have to say, you don't have to dive all the way to the deep end and you don't turn it on until it's all automated. You just start automating the bits and pieces behind the curtain. Listen, we just said it on this podcast. This is not all enterprise ready right now, right? This is clearly the future. It's moving very fast. This could be 12 months. It could be 36. It could be 48 months before this is really a situation where large enterprises around the world are leaning in on this kind of agentic automation. But it's coming, and it will absolutely transform how we think about the tech stack. I mean, at the end of the day, if you have all that automation we're describing, what do you ultimately need? I mean, it's funny because in the 90s, we started out with the ERP, right? SAP. Oh, it's really hard to use. Let's bolt on all of these layers onto the tech stack, and we have all this stuff up here. SAP or Oracle or these you need a place to store your contract. You need a place to record the financial transaction. There's a whole bunch of these things that are needed. But my prediction is that these layers between the underlying ERP and the user are going to get squashed out by this agentic automation because we built that because common people can't actually use SAP. It's not very easy. But the agent can absolutely be a brilliant SAP user. Oh, you want to do that? I need to go into, transaction code L75 and do this, and over to L23 and do that. And just doing all this stuff in SAP because it knows how.
It's not just using SAP. It's literally the reason we built SAP is because people don't know databases and how you code this database. But agents can do all that and not even show that to you. They'll build the database in the back, tell you, it exists. You don't need to learn database querying, database. That's fractal. Agent just goes, builds it for you. That's ultimately what it's about. I do think these agents can replace the entire stack. In fact, I think they must replace the whole stack of, the Coupa stack, right? Because all your context, all your data needs to be in a shared structure for the agents to actually coordinate and work properly. If you introduce that layer of abstraction around having a Coupa as well and having zip and all this stuff as well, it's adding complexity that's completely unnecessary. The agent is able to do all of that without those tools. Now, the question becomes what we've touched on right at the beginning, which is how do you do the policy, the coding part, right? Because you don't want an agent to have unlimited control. Maybe eventually they get so smart you can trust them, but there will be some hard gates and things that you want to enclose. So you need some kind of system supporting it. I think to give people the confidence, yeah. Or in Kasey's case, some kind of sandbox. You give the agent you give it its own credit card, its own email account, and so it doesn't do anything stupid.
Yeah, you got the guardrails and the limits to protect from things going too crazy. Just like humans again. Remember before we were okay. You can buy on a credit card, but only up to $2,000 or $3,000 or $5,000. There's boundaries here. You can't buy your $1 million software on your credit card. Now, let's wrap it up. Let's get practical. Kasey, I'd love to start with you. You've really, and this is going to sound like I'm trying to beat up on Kasey. I'm not. He has been pushing AI around our organization. He's our head of operations. And so he's sort of responsible for a lot of the business functions at Graphite that need automation. So he's already been sort of on the edge of understanding what AI can do for us. But literally 8 weeks ago, this kind of stuff wasn't what he was doing. What's your practical advice, Kasey? Again, this is procurement. This is the new procurement leader at Club Med in the Caribbean who wants to figure out how to have an agent and how to get going. What's step 1, 2, and 3?
Well, I would urge, I think most people probably even listening don't have the ability like I do today to start implementing these agents within an enterprise organization. I think that's a little ways out where that's going to be accessible. So what I would say is you have to start getting familiar and testing these things. And like we described at the beginning, that may be and probably should be in your own life outside of your work experience, but you learn the exact same things. There's going to be a moment in the future where enterprises all are ready to deploy these things. And those that are familiar with how it works have gone through the trial and error that I've experienced with different use cases. I mean, it doesn't even have to be your own life. You could stand up just like what we built there, you could stand up a Mac Mini with all these ideas you want to automate around your procurement process internally and have the agent build faux scenarios with you, build 500 complex faux contracts, and build everything that's going to take place here to where it's actually demoable for your internal team, for the organization to show them, look how cool this is, guys. I think we can do this. I think you can really make a lot of progress outside of your organization in a completely safe environment to then be ready to introduce these things inside. I think it scares everybody when you go, I don't know if you go to IT and say, hey, I'm going to start an OpenClaw bot to automate this process within our organization. But I think if you can go to that same person within the organization and say, watch this, look what I've done with my own Gmail account or a new Gmail account I stood up, not associated with the business. There's a lot of proof you can make here to show why these things will work so well. Do it on your own time. Do it after hours. You'll have a blast working on these things. It's pretty awesome.
So you didn't use these two words, but I'm going to say leadership and influence there. That is such a big deal. You're going to want and need these agents before the enterprise is ready to give them to you. And you're going to need to be able to help the enterprise. Unless you really have an AI forward organization, you're going to need to help them figure out how to really just say no, right? Like the parent that says no to everything, the organization is going to say no to this. you've got to be prepared to have that conversation and help them understand that there is a safe path forward. Okay, Zach, bring us down the home stretch. What's your, I mean, you're working now in AI. You've been at it in, different flavors and technology for quite a while now. What are your observations? And again, what are your 1 or 2 or 3 suggestions to that procurement leader who, I know, folks, a lot of the language here kind of went over your head. Like, it feels intimidating. It isn't as intimidating as it feels. Please remember that. But Zach, what would
We're not even close.
what would you suggest, Zach?
I really can't put it better than Kasey, right? Do it in your personal life. And actually, some of the people I know, like even older folks, right? Who are like ahead of the younger folk because they are applying this in their personal life and they're really keen to learn about agents. And by the way, it doesn't have to be a procurement use case. If you look at how people are using OpenClaw, Manus, some of these other agents, because OpenClaw made a buzz, but there were some agentic tools before that they use them to like do the shopping, to order food for you, to manage your kids' schedules, to communicate with different, use it to actually improve your personal life. I'll be honest, I'm not doing that myself. I'm not using a personalized agent, but with something like OpenClaw, that's the perfect use case. And there have been these funny stories of like OpenClaw spending $200,000 of someone's money, like someone just losing all that money because so be careful with it. But yeah, I can't really add to that, to what Kasey said, is like you really
Zach, it sounds like your homework is to go stand one of these up and come and report back on how easy or difficult it was.
Absolutely. I'd love to do that. Yeah, for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah. I imagine it was going to be, as easy as you made it sound, Kasey. And I think that's why we encourage everyone to really get into it. Yeah.
Don't be intimidated, folks. You can do this. So we are all about practical procurement here at Proc-N-Roll. We're all about learn, grow, share, and connect. So please comment, like, and share and engage on this episode. Zach offered himself up. If you'd like a little bit of help, you need a little bit of help, you can kind of find us through the episode. I wish we had our Twitter handles all set up, or our X handles, but we're not that. We're on LinkedIn. Come find us, ask us for help, and we are happy to help. This isn't us trying to sell our business and make a bunch of money. We just want to help you join the revolution of automation and the future. This is going to be really cool. Together, we're all sort of understanding and creating a better future for procurement. So thank you, everybody. We'll talk to you again next time.